The Starr and D'Amico Show is brought to you by cheapesttshirts.ca. If you're looking for quality gear without overpaying, shop cheapesttshirts.ca. Huge selection for men, women, and kids. Tees, hoodies, headwear, bags, and more. Proud Montreal business. Order today, ship today, delivery tomorrow. That's cheapesttshirts.ca. Local, fast, and affordable. Brought to you by instacustoms.com. Do you need custom gear from a local Montreal business? Instacustoms.com has you covered. Custom shirts, hoodies, hats, and more made your way. Fast turnaround, great quality, and proudly Montreal-based. Check out instacustoms.com. Brought to you by Cabletel. For trusted alarm systems in Quebec and Eastern Ontario, choose Cabletel. Over 20 years of expert installation and top-tier protection for homes and businesses. Check out Cabletel.com. Email them info@Cabletel.com. It's Cabletel. Peace of mind you can count on. Brought to you by Morella's Steakhouse. Looking for an unforgettable night out? Morella's Steakhouse on Highway 132. It's just 15 minutes from Montreal, serving up premium cuts and bold flavors, and no tax on your bill. Book your table tonight at morellassteakhouse.ca. Taste excellence tonight. Brought to you by Little Bear. Give your pet the best with Little Bear Pet Supply. It's a proudly family-owned business here in Montreal for over 30 years. Chuck, Evie, and their all-star staff have you taken care of with all the top brands at the best prices, and they really care for your pets. Shop online at littlebearonline.com or visit them on St. Catherine across from Westmount Square. It's Little Bear Pet Supply. Brought to you by McLean's Pub. Head over to McLean's Pub, 1210 Peel Street in the heart of downtown Montreal. Great food, cold drinks, and big games on all the screens. McLean's Pub, good times and great company. Welcome to Starr and D'Amico, YouTube.com, or wherever you get your favorite audio podcast platforms. There he is, my partner in crime. It's Marco D'Amico, the senior editor for RG.org, covering all things Montreal Canadiens. And we have a lot to dive into. Obviously, some topics, some hot topics that we're going to get into. We're going to talk this week on the channel as it relates to Patrick Laine, as it relates to Nazem Kadri. All that's coming up. But in the here and now, Marco, it looks like the Laval Rocket, man, not only are they building a cushion in that North Division, right? Building a nice little gap, not so much the extreme parity that NHL fans are enjoying in the Eastern Conference and Atlantic Division, but wow, what a last couple of days, hasn't it been for Pascal Vincent and his boys in Laval?
Yeah, it's definitely been good. I mean, I think you look at last night's game, I think that was a little bit more structured, a little bit more what they like to see. But, you know, coming out of this weekend with 4 points in 2 games, and then looking at the way that they've played over the last 2 weeks.
El Frozeno. Dun, dun, dun. Well, good morning, everybody. We'll see if we can iron this out here in a second. In the meantime, as we say good morning to everybody in the chat on Super Bowl Sunday, as the New England Patriots do their thing against the Seattle Seahawks. I'll give you my picks, no doubt. The optimism is already reigning supreme as a Warzone Clipper 914. The Lane Hudson bandwagon is full, rightfully so, 100-point season. Good morning, everybody. Nice to see so many members of the Starr and Starr and D'Amico community in full effect. As yes, pause for dramatic effect. We've got some technical issues on the Marco D'Amico side. We'll see if we can square that away, but a pleasure to be with you on this Sunday morning, coming into you live. Obviously, when Marco can sort out what's going on over there, we'll talk about the Laval Rocket and the fact that they're, coming off a massive win over the Cleveland Monsters, a penalty-filled game. Jacob Fowler playing well. Laval makes Cleveland pay as they go 2 for 4 on the man advantage. And as we spoke about, I mean, Adam Engstrom is having a beast of a season. This guy's on clip to be more or less a point-a-game player in the American Hockey League. But yeah, good morning, everybody. Not the ideal start to your Sunday morning. And obviously, I want to talk about what's going on with the Team Canada squad and Nick Suzuki's role. Has that role now been increased in the aftermath of some key injuries, and what Nick Suzuki's role is likely to look like as the men's hockey tournament opens up on Thursday this week? Yeah, Thursday, when they take on Czechia. And we'll handicap, I suppose, the Canada division and of course, the rest of the competing nations in this tournament. Obviously, all eyes on Canada and the USA for this tournament. Marco's texting me now. Let's see what's going on. I'll be right back. So yeah, just dealing with that now. We'll figure it out. Don't worry. But yeah, Canada and the USA. I mean, everybody waiting for that to see how it all shakes out. But are there dark horses in this tournament? We'll handicap the men's Olympic tournament coming up, but no doubt, like Gino and everybody else, the first weekend without a Montreal Canadiens game on a Saturday. But listen, I mean, let's start with the Montreal Canadiens. You know, so many things have gone so well for this team. So many things have gone so well. You know, dealing with goaltending, dealing with various injuries, but yet they keep humming along, man. We're talking about the power play being top 10 in the National Hockey League. We talk about Nick Suzuki, the point pace that he's on. Cole Caulfield, point a game. Lane Hudson, a point a game, as someone in the chat earlier pointed out. Lane Hudson, a 100-point guy in the National Hockey League. There's my man Warzone, right? I mean, just to get to the 90-point threshold, few and far between in this day and age of the National Hockey League. But at the end of the day, right, I mean, you have to feel so good about how this Canadiens rebuild has gone, where it's going, and what it ultimately is going to lead into. I mean, I'm never one to like go all in on it's a sure thing the Canadiens are going to win a Stanley Cup. But I think in decades, this is the first time where we can analyze and take a deep dive into the Montreal Canadiens season and their roster and their future. And I think you can credibly come away with this is as good as this team has looked, as deep as this team has looked going back to their 1993 season. You know, I always remember, you know, I have memories of the Canadiens winning the Stanley Cup in 1986. Obviously, I remember 93 a hell of a lot better than I do 86. But I remember watching the Canadiens and Claude Lemieux and Patrick Roy do their thing in 86 and beating the Calgary Flames, right? Only to lose to the Calgary Flames on Montreal Forum ice just 3 seasons later in 89. But the one thing that was interesting, right, was those teams collectively, yes, granted, they had Hall of Famers, but collectively they were deep. Like they scored goals. And I understand, you know, it was a different era in where they were, but in those 2 years, the team collectively scored over 300 goals. Right now, going into the break where we are now, the Montreal Canadiens are on 174 goals scored. 199 goals scored. I was looking at the wrong thing. And what's also been interesting is that their goal differential has shot right back up. Let's see, we got Marco D'Amico back.
Yeah, I should be back.
Yeah, there we go. Just talking, Marco, quickly about the Canadian season, 199 goals, talking about in their cup runs of 86 and 93. Well, granted, you know, they had some Hall of Famers on that team. Collectively, they scored a lot of goals. That this team more or less is, we'll round up for argument's sake, is that 200 goals scored. We know they have 25 games left, right? But it's been an unbelievable season. And I think, you know, before you joined back in, I was talking about how the first time in arguably decades, not only is the rebuild very much on track, maybe ahead of schedule, but also the depth and the future has never looked brighter than it has, and then what it's going to look like in the years to come.
Well, absolutely. I think 2 of your top 6 are rookies right now, so the sky is definitely the limit in terms of potential. Nick Suzuki and Cole Caulfield seem to be hitting new strides every single season, and Lane Hudson is a point per game defenseman in his sophomore year. I mean, what more can you ask for? The only thing that they're really missing is the blue chip goaltender that's going to win them games and stand on his head every other night. And honestly, that will come. I think, you know, Jacob Fowler has shown an ability to shut down games. I think we saw it last night for the Laval Rocket in their win. And so they're basically there. Offensively, I'm for the first time in a long time, I'm not really worried about this team. I think I'm more worried about them as a unit getting stronger defensively so that they could have a bigger differential gap between the amount of goals they score versus the amount they let in. Because although the goaltending has been weak at times, it's not the only reason.
As always, make sure to like and subscribe to our channel. Just gets more eyeballs, draws more attention, so we appreciate that. And of course, we'll be here all week. We're going to be here throughout the course of the Olympic break. I don't know about you. Before we get into the Laval Rocket, have you been diving into any Olympic coverage whatsoever? I mean, how do you kind of take in the Olympics? Are you like incremental? You start dipping in, and then the enthusiasm takes over, or walk me through how much you enjoy or are a casual Olympic observer.
Well, I would have loved to be able to watch the Olympics, but I was a little busy this week. Um, I usually tend to tune in like now
Yeah,
ish, like because the issue with the base Olympics is that you generally have a lot of like qualifier rounds to certain sports and outcomes, and that's just like not always the best in terms
yeah,
of viewership. You want to see it when like other than hockey, I don't necessarily want to watch round robin. I want to see elimination games. I want to see games that have medal implications. And so that generally starts to happen. Probably by Tuesday, we're
right.
going to start seeing that with a little bit more regularity. And obviously, then once the hockey starts, like everybody kind of jumps in and starts to watch. But it's going to surprise everybody. But for me, my three favorite sports are the half pipe snowboarding. Just
Oh,
absolutely love it.
yeah,
Hockey, and this is going to shock some people, but I absolutely adore watching curling because it's basically ice bocce, and I
yeah,
am so
yeah,
down for
yeah.
that.
Marco, let's dip into the Laval Rocket. They start to pull away, build a nice little gap here as we talk about the American Hockey League standings. After the Friday and the Saturday game, Laval has 47 games and 25 left to go. They're on 29 wins through 47 games, a 660 percentage. And I guess perhaps most importantly, it's 62 points to the chaser in the Syracuse Crunch on 56. We'll get into the Laval locker room in just a second as a couple of guys, and Owen Beck and Adam Engstrom, flexing their parler français un petit peu. But let's start with Adam Engstrom, a 2-assist performance in the win with Jacob Fowler in goal. I mean, have we reached the point where Adam Engstrom is now classified as one of those guys that maybe is too good for the American Hockey League at this point of his pro career?
I think he's there. 30 points in 34 games while being the number one defenseman and playing in all situations. I think he's there. I think if it wasn't for contractual purposes, waiver eligibility and whatnot, he'd be an NHL player for the Montreal Canadiens right now. I feel like he could be playing on a third pair on, I'd say, at least a third of the defensive units in the NHL.
Mm.
And, if he were a right shot defenseman, I don't even think this would be a conversation. So you got to like what you see because the speed is there, the IQ is there, the decision making is on point. Used to be a little bit of an issue, take more risks than not, but you just see a more well-rounded defenseman.
Mm-hmm.
And I think when people look at him and they say, "Well, he plays a lot like Mike Matheson," I think he's way more risk averse than Mike Matheson at the same age. Though, granted, Matheson was playing in the NHL around this time already, but I just I see a more well-rounded player at a younger age. Maybe what you see in Mike Matheson today, yes, but it took Mike Matheson 12 years to get there.
Yeah.
So, you got to give and take a little bit in that regard. 13 years if you really want to get technical. So, I'm not necessarily at a point where I think he's too good. I don't think you can over ripen in the AHL, but
Mm.
be it in the form of a call up, in the form of a trade chip, he has reached blue chip status, in my opinion. I think all day, every day, very like projectable NHL defenseman. The question is simply, is he going to be a number 4? Is he going to be a number 5? Is he going to be less? Is he going to be more? But I think that's where he slots in is 4 or 5.
Well, it's interesting, right? When we talk about Adam Engstrom specifically, and I want to touch on Joshua Roy, David Reinbacher, a couple of guys that have been dealing with injury that returned to Pascal Vincent's Laval Rocket roster. Um, we may have some more issues. No, I think we're good. With Joshua Roy scoring, Adam Engstrom having a multi-point night, but and obviously David Reinbacher. But just to finish up on Adam Engstrom for a second, I mean, does this put more pressure on Struble and Jackeye to lock their positions down with the Montreal Canadiens with the season that Engstrom is currently having?
I mean, I would say so. I think that they absolutely need to watch their backs and they absolutely need to keep up the pace because if not, what are you going to do?
Mm-hmm.
The Canadiens have to make a choice by this summer on who of the three they keep, and they can only realistically keep two because Engstrom is NHL ready. So if you know that, and you know he's NHL ready, and he could play both sides of the ice very well, and he fits into the high tempo transition game you're willing to play, and he's not your typical puck moving defenseman because he is, well built. It's 6'2", almost 6'3", and probably going to fill out around 200 pounds. Like, he's not going to be an easy guy to move either. So I think he fits perfectly as a third pair option as soon as next season if the Canadiens are able to make some moves. But then comes the obvious question, because this will piss a lot of Hab fans off.
Oh boy.
Do you take Arbor Jackeye out of the lineup for someone like Adam Engstrom? Because the way the Canadiens are built right now, they're not going to take out Carrier. And so it becomes a question of rotation between him, Engstrom, and Arbor Jackeye. And I think that that's a conversation for down the road with the Montreal Canadiens that I thankfully don't have to be a part of an answer to. But this is the kind of thing you need to think about when it comes to how they're going to build out their roster.
I was just about to sneeze. I mean, does it also, like, when you talk about Jackeye and Struble and now Engstrom, I don't want to talk about guys getting moved, but I mean, at one point, if someone in Laval is worthy of a shot, or is the season too old and the team too competitive to even kind of think about a decision like that? Are you just not going to ride the Strubels and the Jackeyes and hope that one guy can maybe stack better game after better game?
I think once you start getting into the tail end of the season and into the playoffs, you tend to lean more on your top four than you do the whole top six. And if you look at a lot of the playoff teams, the deployment is basically 50 minutes of 60 between the first two pairs, and then about between 8 to 12 for the bottom pair. That's generally how it goes. And I don't think it's that kind of a thing. And I think we spend a lot of time talking about like fifth and sixth defensemen, but I feel like those are kind of positions that you fill out when you compete, when you're
Right.
at the end of the rope. I think that's where that's where the conversation needs to be had.
So while we have defensemen in front of mind, David Reinbacher, Marco, who has been well documented, the injury history for this number 5 overall. And the latest injury had him out for a stretch, but he made his return to the lineup, and on Saturday was able to at least pick up an assist, and saw some people that were watching that game. I mean, they kind of liked Arbor Jackeye's game. What's the takeaway from Arbor Jackeye's latest return?
Arbor Jackeye or David Reinbacher?
David Reinbacher, excuse me.
Yeah, when it comes to David Reinbacher, I mean, like, what do you there's not much to expect from him in this regard. I mean, he played well enough. The Canadian, the Laval Rocket allowed 1 goal against. I think Jacob Fowler played a fantastic game. They didn't give the Cleveland Monsters much. Luca Del Bel Belouz, a really good friend of Owen Beck's, by the way, was
nice.
the most dangerous forward for them, during the last 2 games for the Cleveland Monsters. Other than him, they shut down pretty much everybody on the other end. And, that bodes really well for them. I think that, again, there's always going to be a lot of sensitivity with David Reinbacher. Like, there's not much that you can say or do in that regard that will be able to help. But I feel like when it comes to doing his job in the defensive zone, boxing guys out, killing plays, going back up the other way, I think he's really good at that. The only thing I need to see more of, and I think he needs to see more of when it comes to those reps, is being able to execute all of what I just said under pressure in a playoff situation when he knows he's about to get shellacked in the corners. That's what I want to see more of David Reinbacher do, because if he can't do that at the AHL level in the regular season, you're going to have to ask yourself questions about how he's going to be able to react in a playoff setting when you're going to be in a conference final, a year or 2 or 3 down the line. You're going to want that defenseman that's going to be able to execute under pressure. So that's what I'm looking for. He ended up getting an assist yesterday in the game as well in his return. So that's always great. But his point totals are not what I'm looking for. Hockey DB is not going to tell me where the value in David Reinbacher is going to be.
That's fair. And listen, I mean, he finished as a plus player. Laval beat Cleveland 4-1. They scored 3 goals in the second period. Before we move on to one of the goal scorers in that game from Saturday, and you're going to hear from Owen Beck and Adam Engstrom in a second. I mean, to your point about David Reinbacher, like, yeah, we're not looking at the goals and assists and the total points, right, for Reinbacher. But if I ask you to predict his future, I think it's pretty hard, would you say, to imagine that he breaks camp as a Montreal Canadien inside their top 6 defensively next season? I mean, I think, are we not still in the territory of want to see this guy put together pretty much a full season before you have like an educated understanding of how this guy's ultimately going to perform?
I think he needs more time than just this season. Honestly, I think he needs more time than just this season. I think we'll see where he's at next year's training camp and you make a call, but I don't think there's any rush with him. And I think that Engstrom's ahead of him, and you already have to make room for Engstrom in that regard. So could the Canadiens call up David Reinbacher? Sure they can. But I'm not quite sure that they're going to rush that process. You know, we talked about this. If the Canadiens clinch a playoff spot and there's like 3 games left of the season, we may see them do like a vast emergency call up and get guys that haven't played NHL games this year into the lineup to finish to finish off the calendar and give Canadiens veterans some time to sleep and heal before the playoff series. That would be a great luxury to have. Canadiens didn't have that luxury last year. They qualified for the playoffs on the 82nd game of the season. But if they can qualify by game 77, 78, then that gives the Canadiens the opportunity to rest some guys, bring up some young players. And I think maybe David Reinbacher gets a call at that point. But I don't, I wouldn't expect him to play in the NHL. He's got so much to catch up on. And I've always been of the mind that he has to spend the entire year in the NHL outside of here's a candy at the end of the season. AHL playoffs, see how he goes, then reevaluate at training camp. And who knows, last year this time, did anybody think that Oliver Kapanen was going to be the second line center of the Montreal Canadiens? No. Yeah. So development is a funky thing. We'll see how he comes in. If he could finish the season healthy, it'll be the first season where he could actually really work on his lower body in terms of adding mass. What's he going to look like after that? How does that affect his game? These are all things that we would have to look at next year's training camp.
Let's take some questions from the audience on the David Reinbacher front. Our boy Rod Langway fan club says Reinbacher will ultimately take Alexander Carrier's spot by the end of next season. AC says it's time to trade him. Our boy Panathathia says Habs can afford to wait. Vinny Red, what are the chances that Reinbacher is still part of the organization next year? I find myself still very patient with David Reinbacher. I mean, normally I'm not known for my patience, but in this case, I still have all the time in the world to see ultimately where this big righty can grow into and who he can turn into. He's still so young.
Don't sell low on a top 5 pick. That's the thing I'm going to say all day, every day. You're hurting yourself as an organization if you try to just trade him because you're tired of seeing him. Fans may be tired of it. Fans aren't running this team. Cooler heads are running this team. And, the more he develops in the American Hockey League and the more he grows in the American Hockey League, the more sure of an asset he becomes. And it's just a question of staying healthy in the right situations. Like the last 2 injuries are not, what's the word we would call them? They're not.
He's not injury prone in that sense. It's a little
like
bad
fundamental
luck
injury. No.
Yeah.
It's not structural. Right. There it is. It's not a structural injury. And so because it wasn't, those are not things you worry about, right? So because of that, you just want to see him get the reps. You just want to see him play. And I could tell you, the fact that he's a young right shot defenseman, former 5th overall pick, closer to the NHL than a lot of guys that are about to get drafted. I just feel like, again, there may be people that are down on his value right now, but people that think he has no value are very, very wrong. It's just the Canadiens, if he can become what the Canadiens drafted him to be, or even just a shade under that, then the Canadiens will be very happy, especially with the way that the rest of their defensive brigade has kind of worked out. So there's no rush in his regard. If a can't miss offer comes on the table, maybe they consider it, but I don't think they're in a rush to shop David Reinbacher just this second. They want to continue to see what the, what the track looks like for him and what that runway eventually becomes.
Samuel Blais, who was sent on waivers again and when unclaimed, went back to Laval, had 2 assists in the Rockets' 4-1 win over Cleveland on Saturday. Jacob Fowler back in goal. We'll talk about him. We already talked about Adam Engstrom in his multi-point night. David Reinbacher finishes as a +2, 4 penalty minutes, also finished with an assist. But Joshua Roy was all over that game on Saturday in the 4-1 win. Scored a goal, had 5 shots. What's his future look like for you? As far as, I mean, is there one with the Canadiens?
I don't see how there could be, especially with the way that the Canadiens are built right now, the way that they've given out contracts. I mean, just where does he fit? Right? I mean, you have Michael Hage, you have Alexander Zhuravsky that are coming that will probably occupy at worst top 9 roles on this team. They have a defined top 6-ish. Where does he fit in there? I don't know, especially with what the Canadiens have versus what they want to go with. I feel like, he is trade fodder at this stage. If he continues to improve, maybe the Canadiens can use him in a trade. And I just don't see the future for him with Montreal. I think he's going to want to go somewhere where he can kind of get an opportunity for a team that's looking to get younger and has the option to give him that kind of, push and an opportunity to be at least a third-line player in the NHL and see where they go from there.
As you talk about third-line players in the future, enter the chat, Owen Beck.
Incroyable. Yes.
One more time if you missed.
L'atmosphère incroyable. Yes.
The Adam Engstrom there at the end, a little chef's kiss at the end. These boys having some fun. Winning's a good time, man.
Adam and I had that conversation together when I interviewed him back in November. I was like, "What have you learned in French?" And he's like, "Not much." And I was like, "Tabarnak." And he's like, "I should say," and he's like, "I should say that." I was like, "You should say that every day of your life." And now to see him do that on an official video. Oh, it was fantastic. It was so good. So I mean, look, I think there's a good atmosphere going on in Laval. I think it's a prime place to be able to develop talent. Do they have premium talent on that roster? At forward, I don't think so. But definitely on the back end. I think on the back end with Adam Engstrom, David Reinbacher, and then obviously Jacob Fowler. I think those are your key 3 pieces on the back end. And then we'll see what happens with Florian Xhekaj as he continues to kind of develop as a bottom 6 forward for the NHL. I think it's a prime place to play. I think you look at atmosphere, the Bell Center was ranked the #1 place to play in the NHL.
Right.
I think Laval's easily top 3 in the American Hockey League. They may not have the following that the Hershey Bears do, but Laval is right up there. And I think, it's good to see. I think Owen Beck, like I said, is a 4th-line player in the NHL in the making all day, every day. So, just a question of will it be with Montreal or not. I think his face-off acumen, his physicality, his vision, the shooting that we've seen of him of late, if he's able to kind of tap into that a little bit more consistently, I think it's a player that the Canadiens could use on a 4th-line basis, and again, as they tried to do last summer, potential trade chip if ever they need to, look for a player that makes sense.
You talked about Jacob Fowler here. He was the goaltender record in the 4-1 win Saturday. I mean, he's been stacking games, hasn't he? What's the report on Jacob Fowler, his performances, how he's looked? Obviously, now Laval has a new goalie coach in the aftermath of Marco Marciano being promoted up to the National Hockey League as they bring in a Russian goalie coach to help out with the Laval Rocket. But, I mean, a nice performance once again. Looks like he's been putting some better performances on the board now for Jacob Fowler.
Yeah, well, I mean, Friday's game kind of got ahead of him. I would fault him maybe on 2 goals in that victory, but it was a character victory because at the end of the game, the Rocket tie the game and then win it in overtime, and then playing the same team, the AHL schedule, playing the same team the next night. I just felt like it was his opportunity to prove that he could shut that game down, and that's exactly what he did.
Look, I mean, credit to the kid, man. He's got in my opinion, such a good head on his shoulders, Speaking of head on your shoulders, Captain Nick Suzuki is having a phenomenal season leading the Montreal Canadiens into a second place at the break spot in the NHL's Atlantic Division. And now with Team Canada as they begin their Olympic hockey tournament starting on Thursday this week. It starts against Czechia. Puck drop there will be at 10:40 a.m. Marco and I will be here Thursday live at 3 o'clock. So set those reminders. And that means you should like and subscribe to the channel so you don't miss any of the action between now and then. Because we have some stuff. We're going to talk about Patrick Laine and Nazem Kadri as well, right? But Canada in Group A with Czechia, Switzerland, and Alexandre Texier's French side. Before we get into maybe some handicapping of the men's tournament and how it's ultimately going to play out, let's speak more specifically with the injuries that Team Canada is dealing with, especially up front. How do you think that impacts what you thought about Nick Suzuki's role and what that role is likely to be now with the injuries?
Yeah, I think Nick Suzuki is either going to be a 3C or a top 6 winger now, and I think that's fantastic. I think ahead of the tournament, I would have, from what I was told, I think Hockey Canada viewed him a smidgen ahead of Bo Horvat. You remove Anthony Cirelli and Braden Point, 2 centers from that equation. I think Point probably would have been shifted to the wing. So I think Nick Suzuki being the third line center and being able to match up against the opposition's top lines is a necessary challenge. And one of the main reasons why they wanted to bring him in is because Martin St. Louis uses him as shutdown scoring center. And that's exactly the kind of role they would want from him on a third line in this kind of a tournament.
So it starts on the 12th. They get right back at it the next day. It'll be at 3:10 in the afternoon on Friday when they take on Switzerland. And then France on Sunday. So that'll be February 15th, back to a 10:40 a.m. start. And by the way, first place in Group A qualifies directly for the quarterfinals. The other teams that don't finish in first are going to go in basically a playoff games moving forward at that point. I mean, how much of a dark horse are Czechia? We've seen that country win Olympic gold in the past. They've got, obviously led by the great David Pastrnak there. They've got a pretty strong roster. I mean, the expectation is still Canada finishes first atop Group A. How big of a threat will Czechia, Switzerland be for them?
Well, Czechia just lost Pavel Zacha to injury, right? So that's a big blow right there. Got to watch out for them with Pastrnak, of course. I just don't think that they have the back end to be able to keep up with Canada. I really just don't. And I think at a World Junior setting where players are a little bit more free reign and systems aren't necessarily as well developed, Czechia has had Canada's numbers, in the last 2-3 years. I get it. This isn't the World Juniors. These are professional top-end athletes. I don't foresee Canada having necessarily too much trouble if they play to the level of their ability. And so I think that's the trap. Don't take your opponent, lightly, and I think you should be okay. But, you look at the Canada's depth at forward, you look at their shutdown ability on defense. I'm not necessarily worried for them in that regard. It's going to be, and it will always be in this tournament, and it was the same thing in the Four Nations. Will the goaltending hold?
The Americans, by everyone looking at the USA, Canada, USA, everyone's salivating at that possibility. They're in Group C. They also, like Canada, they play on the 12th. They're going to play later in the day, just after 3. So they've got Latvia, Denmark, and Germany. Canada's got Czechia, Switzerland, and France. I think Canada has the tougher draw than the Americans, no?
I mean, yeah, I would definitely have to say, I think with respect to the countries that you pointed out in Group C, it almost feels like a World Cup draw where it's the favorite and then 3 periphery countries. Listen, these group stages are irrelevant. All the big countries are getting through, right? In terms of that discussion. So that Team Canada has a harder time earlier on. Great.
Yeah.
Have them go through some adversity. Have them force John Cooper to have to mix and match some lines and change his strategies up and take in information. I'd love that. I think that's great, because if it's too easy early on, then you get to the elimination games, and the moment adversity hits, you don't know what to do.
Nikita Kucherov had an interesting comment. I'm curious to get your reaction. Without Russia and their participation, in this tournament in the Milano and Cortina that this isn't a true best on best. Do you agree or disagree?
I 100% agree. I 100% agree. I mean, just make a Team Russia right now.
Oh boy.
And I would put them neck and neck with Canada and the US. So if there is a team that could finish with a medal that is not in this tournament, then it's not true best on best. With that said, I'm not going to be a snob about it. It's the closest thing to best on best we've had in 12 years, and I'm going to take it.
All day. Yeah. I'm not boycotting because Russia isn't there. You know, I'm with you, but I also agree with Kucherov. And I guess the other thing, too, is Ivan Demidov would be on that team, would he not?
Yes. Yeah, I'd have to venture that Demidov would be on that team. I mean, even in a third line role, second power play utilization, you'd have to put, look, if we go and do a list of all the Russian-born players in the NHL and where they rank in points, he's in the top 12.
Yeah.
So by default, I would put him there. I would put him there before Michkov because unlike Matvei Michkov, Demidov has shown growth in his two-way game, his effort level. He's in shape. So there's definitely elements like that where you'd want to put him in. But then you have younger guys like Yurov, for example. Danila Yurov would be an interesting case as well as a bottom six player for Russia. And we already know all the top guys that would play, to me, I think the true net advantage for Russia would be goalies. I think from a goaltending perspective, they're the only team that can match up to the United States in terms of the goaltending depth.
I wish Canada had their goaltending. That's how good it is. I mean, Kucherov, Malkin, Kaprizov, Buchnevich, Panarin, Marchenko, Ovechkin, Nemestikov, and Demidov. I mean, holy cow. What an unbelievable deep talent pool. I mean, that's just the first kind of 9 forwards you're thinking of, right?
Yeah, and you can, there's plenty of other players that we could add to that list. Like I spoke about, Yurov is definitely a player that I would look at significantly. Barbashev, I don't think was mentioned, and that he would have to be on that roster. So there are guys like that. And again, we're talking about it. I think it'll eventually happen. I'm not going to get into politics and all of that jazz, but eventually I would hope that it gets sorted out. There is an opening of the IHF to let, I believe not this year, but next year, Russians back into U18 competitions. So 4 years down the line in 2030, we'll see where we're at that point. But I'm far more excited for this than I was for the Four Nations. And the Four Nations were absolutely excellent. So let's see how this goes. I think yes, it's not true best on best, but at this point, who cares?
Aren't you interested to see how the games are going to play out? Obviously, you talk about the Four Nations and the infamous American group chat, and then how Canada and USA got going on Bell Center Ice with scraps and everything else. That we know that there's going to be NHL refs for the men's Olympic tournament, but the IIHF and Olympic hockey, there is no fighting. So I don't imagine we're going to see a carbon copy of Four Nations if and when Canada and the USA face off, right? I mean, how much do you think that changes with how the Americans approach this tournament?
They're going to try to impose themselves physically, right? And I think that's where it's at. You don't necessarily have to beat your opponent into submission. This isn't the 70s. But I think that playing them hard, taking advantage of the fact that the neutral zone is quite a bit smaller than in the NHL, right? The size of the arena is going to play into it. So you're going to see some trench roars in the neutral zone in terms of getting bodies in the way. It's honestly going to feel like an NHL 3-on-3 minis version. Whether or not that's kind of sullies and puts an asterisk on that tournament, regardless. But it's going to require a change in strategy, I think. I think it's going to require a change in strategy. A change that's going to require the Canadians, Americans, those are the two primarily more physical teams in this tournament, to maybe tone it down in terms of the after whistle skirmishes. And, I don't think we'll see fights necessarily, but guys like Tom Wilson are going to feast along the boards in tournaments like this. And I think that in and of itself will allow teams like Canada, teams like the US to play a little bit more physical. One player I think is going to be able to feast on this tournament is Juraj Slafkovsky. The combination of size, mobility, the strength that he has in protecting the puck, and the efficacy in transition. I think they're going to lean on him heavy for Team Slovakia. I'm very interested to see how he matches up now that the former MVP of the 2022 Olympics has to look at how things are going to happen with NHL talent on the ice, just to see how he's evolved. I'm going to be very interested in that regard.
I'm glad you brought up his name because I wanted to talk about him. Of the 4 members of the Montreal Canadiens that are at the Olympics, Nick Suzuki, Juraj, Oliver Kapanen, and Alexander Texier, I think it's fair to say of those 4 players, Juraj Slafkovsky is probably going to have the most important role of anybody playing on their team. And you talk about the 2022 games. I mean, they medaled. And I think that was instrumental in terms of how many eyeballs were put on Juraj, and then ultimately he goes number 1 overall to the Montreal Canadiens. But I mean, it was interesting. Arpon Basu of The Athletic talked about, he wants to go see them because of all the media hysteria around Juraj and that national program and how important a role he's going to play.
Yeah, well, I don't disagree. First of all, every time that Juraj Slafkovsky scores, it's an automatic. He needs to be interviewed by the NHL.com's European reporter.
Yeah.
Whenever we have any of the Slovak media in Montreal to talk to him, it is just love, immediate, hugs. How you doing? Oh my God, you've been so good. It's like being interviewed by your parents. It's hilarious. But at the same time, do I think he's going to have the most important role? I don't know that I think Alex Texier is also kind of on an island on his own. He's the only NHLer to play for Team France. So,
yeah, but we have no expectations on the French side, right? I mean,
I didn't know we were going to go and measure expectation off role here. But if it came off, the player that's going to play the most important role for his team, I think it's probably going to be Texier. At least Juraj has backup in NHL talent that are going to be able to play with him. Texier is on an island by himself.
Yeah.
So I think he's going to get a significant amount of time, and we'll see how it goes. Juraj Slafkovsky, to me, probably going to be the most interesting player to watch for his country. But I am adamant, and I continue to say this. I think the player that has the most amount of opportunity ahead of him to climb the ranks is Nick Suzuki.
Mm-hmm.
I think Nick Suzuki, given the injuries, given my opinion on how certain players play on a general basis, and given how some of those players play in tight spaces, I think Nick Suzuki is going to find himself in a top 6 setting rather quickly in this tournament because of the way he's able to play through adversity and always has.
I thought, honestly, going into the tournament before the injuries started to mount up a little bit for Canada's side, that he was going to be instrumental in goal prevention. Like he spoke about before he left for the break, right? How much he misses playing shorthanded minutes. When he was asked about, listen, your role on the PK, he's like, I miss it. I miss playing shorthanded.
Martin St. Louis is costing this guy a Selke.
Yeah.
Play the man. I know tons of, because the Professional Hockey Writers Association votes on the Selke. And I've spoken to many who is like, he'd be a shoe-in number 1 for me if he played more on the penalty kill. And I think that's really what holds him back. How can you give a Selke to a guy that doesn't play upwards of 1.5 to 2 minutes on average on the penalty kill every night, right? You have it's the top defensive forward. How is he not playing? But as Doug Armstrong said when he justified, putting Nick Suzuki on this team, it's a Martin St. Louis call, not an ability context. So I feel like Nick Suzuki is probably going to get more PK time now, especially with the injury to Cirelli, than he does with the Montreal Canadiens. But I don't think that would stop him from coming up the lineup at 5-on-5, especially as they start to cut the bench, because he has that gamer element to him. And because he plays with such intelligence, and because in the conversations that I've had with John Cooper, the head coach, he finds chemistry with absolutely anyone. And I think that versatility is what's going to make him extremely valuable for Team Canada.
Who are your top 3 centers for Canada starting on Thursday? In order, 1, 2, 3.
Probably, I think Crosby and McKinnon are going to be on the same line. So I would Crosby, McKinnon, take your pick on who the center is.
Yeah.
McDavid, Nick Suzuki, Bo Horvat.
Oh, wow. Okay. I thought for sure Suzuki was probably going to slot in on the wing. I mean, I guess you're right. I mean,
I think Celebrini,
yeah.
Marner, Hagel, Marchand, Tom Wilson, those are going to be like on the wing. I'm sure I'm forgetting someone in there.
Marchand,
but
yeah.
Well, I said Marchand, but he's going to be on the wing.
Okay.
So those are your guys that you're going to be looking at. Mark Stone, another one that's probably going to be able to slot on the wing, and then you kind of go from there, right? I think it may be beneficial to see Sam Bennett on the wing on the fourth line. You know, I think that could help put him with a guy like Bo Horvat and have them go wild on the fourth line. But I think you want to see Nick Suzuki, especially now that you've lost Point and Cirelli. Nick Suzuki to me is the next man up. Nick Suzuki to me is the guy that has elevated the most this season. Bo Horvat started the season on fire.
Yeah.
Fire. Only reason Emil Heineman was being propped up by New York Islanders fans is because he was so good at elevating Emil Heineman and being that key piece for the Islanders. But unfortunately, his injury kind of slowed him down a little bit. He was better towards the end, just before the break, but I just feel like Nick Suzuki has the most momentum right now. They're going to want to use him in a dual role. And, you know, with the centers they have, like you mentioned, they have Horvat, they have Bennett. There's a very real chance that Nick Suzuki may just be moved to the wing, and those two will be your 3 and 4 center.
How much are they going to miss Point?
I think you miss a player like Braden Point, especially when you're John Cooper and you know him so well. I think you're going to miss a player like Point. You know, I just don't feel like Point was necessarily. I think Point has to be there on reputation. He has to. Oh, so there you go. Sam Reinhart was the winger I was forgetting. How can I forget a 55 goal scorer, for the love of God? But you know, so you have those wingers there. I just feel like when you miss a guy like Point, I feel like Nick Suzuki is at Braden Point's level at his stage of this career. I think he's there now. And because he's there now, I think it's very interesting to see where they go with it. Canada is blessed, I would say, to have that kind of depth. And I think that's why naming so many centers to your team is there that much more important for that flexibility. When you are able to count, when you're able to replace Point with the Conn Smythe Trophy winner, you're in a good business. So the way I see it is I think Canada will be able to roll with it. It still hurts, but it doesn't hurt as much as, say, losing Cale Makar, for example.
Let's wrap up our preview of the men's Olympic tournament for Canada. It starts on Thursday. You know, we spoke about 3 of the 4 guys. Simon LeBlanc provides the commentary. Curious to see what Oliver Kapanen's role is going to be with the Barkov injury. Modest expectations around Kapanen at this tournament. When we speak about these Scandinavian countries, I mean, lots of love for Team Sweden, especially on defense, and how good they're going to be and how dangerous they can be as an out in this tournament. But more specifically on the Finnish side of things for our Suomi friends, what are we thinking about Kapanen and taking, you know, carrying his production on the Canadian second line to his national program?
I think we may see Kapanen on the wing, at least to start, just because of his lack of experience, just overall youth. I think I'm going to go and double check, but I think he may be the youngest forward there. So definitely going to be something, but I mean, he's a legacy player, right? His family has played for Sweden in an Olympic setting. So it makes sense that they're going to give him some rope. I think he'll start in a top 6 setting. You know, I agree that he may start higher than Nick Suzuki at the very beginning. But I think, look, whatever happens with Kapanen, I think is just good experience. So I see power play time in his future. I see potential PK utilization when you look at the way that roster is kind of built out. You know, for me, I just see him on the wing, and that's okay, at least to start. And if they need to shuffle, they'll shuffle. But I think they're going to try to give him every opportunity to use that shot because he is one of the highest goal-scoring Finnish players in the NHL this season.
Marco, we have some exciting stuff coming up on the channel this week. Why don't you let the audience in on kind of what we're going to be up to, including some live shows coming up as well?
Yeah, well, I mean, we'll be talking about the latest when it comes to fellow Finn Patrick Laine and what we've heard of on his case over the last 24 to 48 hours and where we're at with that. I have an update for you as well on Tuesday when it comes to the Canadiens and Nazem Kadri. Are they really interested in him right now? Is it old news? Are they going to circle back? We have a lot of that coming for you on Tuesday. And of course, we'll have more content for you on Wednesday and a post-game live from Canada's opening game on Thursday in the middle of the afternoon. We'll keep you posted on the time. Be sure to hit those reminders, and you will be informed as soon as we are able to go live and talk about the first Team Canada game at the Olympics in 12 years.
Let's go. Can't wait. Can't wait to be here live, talk about Canada and check you. Marco, enjoy the rest of your Sunday. I don't know if you're going to watch the Super Bowl at all. Are you a big Bad Bunny guy? I mean, what's the plan today?
We're going to try to watch the Super Bowl. Hopefully, knock on wood, everything permits me to be able to be home and watch it.
All right. Good stuff, man. Enjoy the rest of your day and look forward to our next live presentation coming up on Thursday afternoon. Thanks, everybody. Have a good day.
Have a good one.